The ground trembled beneath Kale Riven's boots as distant artillery rumbled across the broken ridges of Varello's Prime. Smoke trailed into the darkened sky like the torn fabric of a planet bleeding out. What had once been fertile plains of luminous grass and whispering trees now stretched out as scorched, cratered nothingness. Charred corpses of armored vehicles jutted from the dirt like decaying teeth, and above it all a low hum of orbital dreadships passed in the clouds, sentinels of a dying accord. Kale adjusted the weight of his field medkit as he sprinted toward the sound of screaming. The heat pressed down like wet iron, and the ash of chemical munitions clung to his stubbled jaw and sweat-matted hair. 3 years of being a field medic in the Orion Concord's peacekeeping corps had carved purpose into every fiber of his body. He didn't stop for thoughts. He stopped for bleeding. "Medic!" a voice cried, raw, ragged alien. He vaulted over the cracked hull of a downed crawler boots, slipping slightly in the dust, and skidded to a halt near a cluster of foreign armor in movement. Tall figures in segmented, iridescent plating a Thalari perimeter stood in chaos. At their center, someone lay cradled in the arms of a commander. Kale's eyes found her instantly. Syra Valen, her red skin so vivid it glowed faintly beneath a sheen of blood, and debris was dulled now. Hair like woven mercury clung to her face, her breathing ragged. And where her right leg should have been was nothing but a blackened stump still sizzling at the edges from the plasma mine that had gutted her below the knee. "Clear space," Kale barked. "Now." The Thalari soldiers hesitated. Their mandibles clicked in uncertain protest. He was human and outsider, and this was an Aurelian diplomat. But their commander, a towering brute with burn-scarred carapace Virek, gave a slow, reluctant nod. Kale dropped beside Syra. His hands moved before his mind caught up trauma dressing field tourniquet gauze laced with regenerative nanites. "She's hemorrhaging fast," Kale muttered. "Our med pods can't process battlefield amputations," Virek growled. "She will not survive the trek back to base, not on foot." "Then we don't trek," Kyle replied, pulling a stabilizer from his pack. "We improvise." Syra's eyes fluttered open green like deep water lightning. Her pupils narrowed, a faint whimper escaping her throat. "I'm Kale," he said, voice low, calming. "Combat medic. I've got you." Her lips trembled. "Am I going to die, Terran?" "Not on my watch." The name was nothing new. Terran was what they called all Earthborns, usually with disdain. But her tone, it wasn't hate. It was fear, hope, maybe both. Kale's eyes landed on the Valkyra-class prosthetic attachment unit tucked deep in his field bag. It wasn't regulation issue. It wasn't even approved. It was experimental, a synthetic leg with a self-calibrating neural interface, designed for humans. "This might work," he murmured more to himself than anyone else. "You mean to graft synthetic Terran tech onto an Aurelian Virek's mandibles flared wide? That's heresy among our kind." "Her leg's already gone," Commander Kale snapped. "She'll be dead in 20 minutes. Or alive with a leg your culture might hate." He didn't wait for permission. Syra's fingers brushed his arm, claws retracted soft, her breath barely audible. "Do it!" That touch did something strange to him. It wasn't just a plea, it was a tether, and it was enough. Kale began the procedure under open sky on scorched earth, while plasma bolts screamed in the distance. Every part of it violated protocol. No sterility, no species compatibility tests. But Kale wasn't one for protocol. He was one for surviving the impossible. He set the interface to adaptive scan. Syra tensed as he injected anesthetics. Her body arched under the pain. Unlike human reactions, her neural signals flared through skin and muscle with bioluminescent flickers. "I need clean water, a second pair of hands, and silence," Kale said. 2 Thalari soldiers knelt steadying Syra's shoulders. The prosthetic hissed to life, gunmetal gray, jointed with bioflex tendons. Kyle aligned it with the shattered femur. Not quite a match. He pulled out interface gel, rerouted the feeds manually. Sparks danced along the neural mesh. Syra's jaw clenched. Her fingers dug into his wrist. "Almost there," Kale whispered. "You're doing incredible." A warning shriek tore through the air as a Zarek scout ship descended, sweeping sensors across the ridge. The soldiers' tensed weapons raised. "They're hunting," Virek hissed. "We must move." "She's not ready," Kale replied. "The neural link isn't set. If you move her now, she'll lose the leg or worse, her life. We do not have time." Kale glanced at Syra. Her emerald eyes burned into his. "How long?" she asked. 30 minutes. "You have 15, Virek said. Kale nodded grimly and resumed. His fingers danced across the control pad. Every beep from the diagnostic reader was another breath stolen from fate. Slowly, the synthetic limb twitched. Syra gasped. "I can feel it." "Move your toes," Kale said. She did. Jerky, awkward, but real. "She's stable enough to move," Kale reported. "She'll need help walking." "I will carry her," Virek declared. "No," Syra whispered. "He understands the limb. The Terran stays." Kale didn't even respond. He was already packing up, slinging the med bag over one shoulder. He slipped an arm around her waist, steadying her as she took a tentative step. Her synthetic foot hummed faintly. It held. She exhaled. "I'm ready." "Miracle worker," Virek muttered, but there was no sarcasm. As they moved into the dusk, the battlefield fell away behind them, still smoldering. Kyle felt Syra's arm tighten slightly around his shoulders. The weight of her against him was light. Too light, but warm. And despite the smell of burning metal, despite the Zaurics overhead, despite the absurdity of the moment, he felt something else spark inside him. Not adrenaline. Something stranger. Something alive. The wilderness surrounding the blast site stretched in every direction, a dead zone of twisted trees and fractured terrain where nothing moved that wasn't trying to kill you. Kale guided Syra through the jagged ridges and unstable ground, her steps hesitant but growing steadier. The synthetic limb whirred softly, a sound almost lost beneath the distant crackle of fire and the mournful wind weaving through burned foliage. Virek and his unit had split off in a flanking maneuver to draw Zaurics patrols away from the path Kale had plotted. The map on his tactical display was ancient, built from topographical scans nearly 30 cycles out of date, but it was all they had. According to the readings, an abandoned recon station lay 6 hours northeast. If they could reach it, there was a chance of long-range communication, maybe evac. Maybe not. Syra barely spoke as they moved. Her jaw was set, breath measured. Each time she shifted her weight onto the prosthetic, a flicker of tension crossed her features. But she didn't complain. She didn't ask for rest. Kale glanced at her once. "You know," he muttered, "you're handling that thing better than most of the human soldiers I've strapped one to." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "Perhaps I'm simply better at hiding pain." He huffed, half amusement, half awe. "You Aurelians have a strange definition of diplomacy. No stranger than Terrans choosing a battlefield for bedside surgery," she countered. "Do you always work this recklessly?" Kale adjusted the strap of his med pack. "Only when beautiful aliens are involved." That earned him a look. Not cold, not amused either, just curious. The sun, or what passed for it on Varellos Prime, began to dip. The sky darkened into deep purples streaked with bioluminescent clouds. Shadows lengthened. As the wind picked up, Syra's hair lifted slightly silver strands catching the light. Her skin shimmered faintly, and Kale realized for the first time that the glowing along her neck wasn't a wound, it was natural, like living circuitry etched in soft coral. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "The leg?" "No, everything else." Syra didn't answer at first. They paused near a ruined cargo transport half buried in collapsed terrain. Kale helped her sit on a slab of scorched metal, crouching to inspect the attachment points. The synthetic limb's interface panel pulsed irregularly. Her system was fighting the foreign tech. "Your body's reacting," he said, "like it's trying to reject the limb." "That's expected," she murmured. "Among my people, cybernetic grafts are taboo. My immune system was never conditioned for hybrid integration." Kale pulled an injector from his belt. "This'll help reduce inflammation. Still, if the link doesn't stabilize, you'll lose functionality." Syra tilted her head slightly. "And if I lose the leg, then I'll build you another one. Better. Stronger. I'll upgrade the toes." That earned him a ghost of a smile. "You joke about everything," she said. "Only when I'm terrified." The injection hissed into her bloodstream. She winced. "I was supposed to attend the Solaris Accords tomorrow," she said quietly. "Sit across from Zaurics delegates. Negotiate the disarmament of a weapon that can vaporize planets." "And instead you got vaporized yourself," Kale replied, softer now. "Hell of a twist." "They won't stop," she whispered. "They didn't just target us randomly. They knew. Our path. Our escort patterns. Someone leaked it." Kale didn't respond. He checked the prosthetic's alignment again, fingers brushing against the ridged socket. The skin just above it was hot to the touch. Red. Swollen. They couldn't stay out in the open. "Come on," he said, helping her to her feet. "We need cover." He wrapped an arm around her waist again. Her hand settled on his shoulder, lighter now, but not hesitant. They moved slowly, step by step, toward the ridgeline. By the time the sky turned pitch and the first stars emerged, unfamiliar constellations glowing in blue and gold, they found shelter beneath an outcrop of collapsed crystalline rock. The formations sparkled with internal biolight, illuminating the small hollow with a gentle cyan glow. Kale laid out a thermal blanket. Syra sat her movements deliberate, careful. "You didn't have to do this," she said after a while. "Any of this. You could have left me there." "Yeah, I could have," he replied, stretching his legs. "But then I'd have to live with it." Syra studied him. The light made her features seem even more alien. High cheeks, ridged temples, faint glowing lines beneath her skin. Yet there was something unmistakably familiar in her expression. "What is it about Terrans?" she asked. "You rush into danger for strangers, break rules, burn treaties. Why?" Kale stared into the dim light of the cave. "Because sometimes doing the wrong thing is the only way to do the right one." A silence passed between them. Then Syra lay back on the blanket, one hand over her stomach. "It's strange," she whispered. "Your presence. It feels stabilizing." Kale blinked, like emotionally. "No," she said. "Literally. When you're near the neural feedback in the limb comms, as if it recognizes your proximity." "That's not in the manual," he muttered. Another silence, this one thicker, warmer. Syra didn't move when Kale shifted closer to check her readings. Didn't flinch when his fingers grazed her side or when his breath touched her skin. The glow of her body pulsed faintly in rhythm with the prosthetic's interface, two signals slowly syncing. Their eyes met. Not a word spoken. Not needed. The cave entrance narrowed behind them, sealing away the outside world with its bitter wind and thunder of distant plasma fire. Inside, the glow of bioluminescent fungi cast soft halos along the stone walls, flickering as if alive. The air was thick with mineral dust, and the faint tang of ozone from the synthetic limb's overworked interface. Kale knelt beside Syra, his diagnostic tablet balanced on a jagged rock. The data didn't make sense. The prosthetic's neural mapping had advanced far beyond standard integration speed. Signals that usually took days, sometimes weeks, to stabilize were aligning in mere hours. And the signal quality was improving when he was close to her. "I don't get it," he murmured, swiping across the interface logs. "This thing was never tested on Aurelian physiology. It shouldn't be this smooth." Syra's eyes, half-lidded from exhaustion, flicked toward him. "You said earlier that Terran tech was built for human combatants. Why bring something unapproved into the field?" Kale grunted. "Let's just say my CO doesn't read my reports too closely. I tinker. Sometimes it saves lives." She didn't answer. Instead, she closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. The quiet lingered between them, but it was no longer uncomfortable. "You said you felt stabilized when I'm near," he ventured, voice low. "What does that mean exactly?" Syra opened her eyes. "It's difficult to explain. Aurelians have subdermal sensory receptors tuned to our biosphere. They also adapt to certain frequencies emitted by organic systems, pheromonal, electric, sometimes emotional. Your presence resonates with mine. That resonance may be what's accelerating the neural interface. So we're biologically compatible to a degree." She paused. "It's rare, but not impossible." Kale swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what unsettled him more, the idea that his proximity was somehow fusing with her nervous system, or the fact that it didn't bother him. Before he could respond, a soft vibration pulsed beneath the stone beneath them. Kyle tensed, placing a hand on the cave wall. "Movement," he said. "Zyorix patrol, maybe." Syra tried to sit upright, but the motion sent a ripple of pain through her shoulder. The synthetic limb stiffened in response, protective lock mode. "You need more than field tools," she whispered. "You need a full resync. There's no lab out here." Her eyes scanned the chamber, settling on a structure deeper in the cave. Carved into the far wall, half buried in vines and glowing root systems, was a half-collapsed arch shaped not by hand, but by energy. Smooth stone curled outward in fractal spirals. "A Varellan relic," Syra said. "Older than the Concord. Precursor tech. There may be an integration pod inside." Kale followed her gaze. "You think it still works?" "Varellan tech is semi-biological. It doesn't degrade. If anything, it may respond to what we've already started." He hesitated. "If we go in, what happens?" Syra met his eyes. "It may finish what you began, but the interface is designed for Aurelian cognitive resonance. It will adapt by bonding with your signal too." Kale raised an eyebrow, meaning it will join us. "Not just nerve to metal, but thought to thought. You'll feel me, and I'll feel you." Kale stared at her. His throat felt dry. "That's invasive." "Yes," she said, "but also intimate." He didn't move for a long breath. Then he stood, extending a hand. "Let's try not to fry each other's brains." The chamber beyond the arch hummed as they stepped into it. Bioglass walls flickered to life, displaying ancient symbology Kale couldn't decipher. A pod rose from the center of the floor, translucent, filled with a silvery mist that shimmered like liquid starlight. Syra placed a hand on the pod. It pulsed, accepting her biosignature. "Only works with dual imprint," she said. "Put your hand here." Kyle joined her, their fingers barely touching on the surface. The pod split open with a gentle sigh. "Inside," she said, "the pod wasn't built for comfort. It wasn't built for modesty either." Syra removed the top layer of her diplomatic armor with practiced efficiency, revealing skin beneath patterned with faint glowing lines, like circuitry merged with veins. Kale felt a tightness in his chest he couldn't quite name. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I trust you." He stepped in after her, the pod sealing with a hiss. The silver mist coalesced around them, thickening into a fluid cocoon that pressed against their skin like warm silk. Electrosensory pads locked around Syra's prosthetic, sending pulses through her spinal column. And then it began. Kale felt a jolt, not pain, but presence. A cascade of images flooded his mind, a memory of Syra's homeworld, luminous spires beneath an aurora sky. The taste of the air there, rich and mineral sweet. The first time she was chosen for diplomatic service. The quiet sadness of leaving behind someone unnamed. His own memories poured out in return. His first deployment, his brother's funeral, the moment he realized saving lives mattered more than taking orders. They didn't speak. The pod wouldn't allow it. But they understood. Signals overlapped, neural maps intertwined. The prosthetic shimmered between them like a shared tether. Kale's heartbeat synced to Syra's. He could feel the fatigue in her lungs, the tension in her gut, the heat of her frustration. And she felt his, the aching scar on his left leg, the grief he buried so deeply. The way he felt her fingers on his arm, even now. And more than that, she felt how much he wanted her to live, not just as a diplomat, but as Syra. Outside the pod, the stone chamber dimmed as the system rerouted its last reserves of energy. Inside, the neural sync reached peak resonance. Kale's voice formed silently in his mind. "Can you feel it?" Syra's reply echoed not in words, but in emotion. "Yes, and I'm not afraid." The mist began to recede. The prosthetic, now fully harmonized, pulsed in time with Syra's heartbeat. But something else had changed. Kale could still feel her. Even as the pod opened, even as the mist faded, they had merged. Not in body, but in mind. And there was no going back. The world outside the pod felt different, sharper, clearer, as though a lens had been wiped clean. Kyle stepped out first, water glistening across his skin, steam rising faintly from his shoulders. The mist clung to him like a scent he couldn't name. Behind him, Syra emerged, her movements fluid, her eyes brighter than before. The synthetic limb, now seamlessly integrated, moved as if it had always been a part of her. They didn't speak, not immediately. There was no need. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of understanding, of sensation, of thought. Kale adjusted the strap on his medpack, slinging it over one shoulder. He turned to check Syra, instinctively reaching for the interface panel on her leg, but she was already lifting it, pivoting slightly on the new limb with a precision that was uncanny. "You're walking perfectly," he said. Her gaze met his. "Because you're still with me." And he was. Even now, though their bodies were apart, he felt her like an echo at the edge of his mind. A resonance that hummed in the space where his thoughts turned quiet. Not telepathy exactly, something deeper, a shared rhythm. "Let's move," Kale said. "They'll be looking for us." They exited the chamber together, following the cave's winding corridors toward the outer ridge. The light had shifted outside, dawn tinting the horizon in rose and gold, bathing the broken world in temporary peace. But peace was a lie. The shriek of plasma fire cracked through the sky like thunder. Kyle turned sharply as an explosion lit the treetops on the opposite hill, Zorek's drop pods deploying in full force. "They're flanking the mountain," he said. "Virek will try to intercept," Syra added. "If he's still loyal." That was no longer a certainty. Kyle activated his tactical HUD, displaying heat signatures and terrain overlays. A small ravine cut through the nearby forest, offering partial cover. A few clicks beyond that, the forward slopes leading toward the summit temple, where the Solaris Accords were set to begin, assuming any diplomats were still alive. They descended quickly, moving like two halves of the same whole. Syra's stride matched Kale's pace without effort. Their weapon's standard plasma pistol for Kyle, a crystalline pulse blade for Syra, hung ready at their sides. The first ambush came fast. Zayurik's troopers, armored insectoids with triple-jointed limbs and heat-sensing optics, emerged from behind a shattered outpost. Kale fired first, disabling one with a burst to the central thorax. Sira moved in tandem, her blade flashing in an arc that carved through another's weapon arm. The third lunged toward her. Kale had already anticipated it. He shifted, tackled it low, pinned the carapace with his knee, and drove a stun spike into its neural cluster. 3 seconds, 3 enemies, no spoken commands. They stood amidst the still smoking remains, breathing hard but steady. "You're in my head," Kale said, not quite a question. "You're in mine," Sira replied. They pressed on. The resonance between them deepened with each step. Kale could sense Sira's tension before it reached her muscles. He moved to intercept threats before she even turned. She, in turn, redirected fire, covering his blind spots instinctively. The battlefield became an extension of their combined awareness. It wasn't just synergy, it was unity. They reached a canyon pass where a narrow bridge of fused stone crossed a gaping chasm. As they advanced, Kale's pulse quickened. Something felt wrong. A pressure built in his skull, faint at first, then rising like static. Sira gasped. "They're jamming us neural interference." "From where?" She closed her eyes, hand against her temple. "To the south, behind that ridge." Kale activated his scanner, an uplink spike, embedded in the cliffside, transmitting low-frequency disruption pulses designed to sever mind-link channels. "Not just for us," he said grimly. "They're targeting Aurelians, trying to disable shared consciousness." "We shut it down," Sira said. "Then we climb." They moved in silence, scaling the loose rock face with gritted teeth and trembling arms. Halfway up, Zoric sentries spotted them. Plasma bolts scorched the cliff shards of stone raining down. Kale pulled Sira close, shielding her with his body. Her hand touched his chest, and in that moment, they didn't just move. They fused. He saw what she saw, heard what she heard. His limbs moved with her instinct, her precision. They vaulted up the final ledge, rolled behind cover, and coordinated the takedown with almost preternatural ease. A thrown blade from Sira pierced one sentry's eye cluster. Kale dropped the second with a clean pulse burst. The uplink tower stood exposed, pulsing dark violet like a diseased organ. "Disrupt it," Kale said. Sira reached into her prosthetics side panel, retrieving a spike of synthetic nanoglass the relic tech had adapted into a weaponized override key. She jammed it into the uplink's core. The tower shrieked, then collapsed inward on itself, sparks vomiting into the air. The pressure in Kale's mind vanished. Sira staggered slightly. He caught her one arm around her waist. Their skin touched warm against warm. For a moment, the war faded again. "I feel you again," she whispered. "Good," he said. "I'm not letting you go." A flicker of surprise passed across her face. Then something softer. They didn't speak as they made their way down the ridge. The forest below had begun to stir smoke, coiling through the canopy as the Zorics advanced toward the summit. Kale could see the edges of the old temple, now ancient stone towers, rising like fingers through mist. The final destination. But they weren't alone. A patrol spotted them just before the final slope, 8 soldiers. Too many. "We'll never make it in a sprint," Kale said, already calculating routes, failure rates, possible sacrifices. But Sira stepped forward. Her hand pressed against the pulse blade's hilt. Her other touched Kale's neck. "We don't need to run," she said. "We just need to move as one." And then she moved. Kale followed without words, without thought. They became something new in that moment, something faster, stronger. Her precision, his timing, their shared awareness. Together, they struck, ducked, parried, fired 8 Zorics down in less than a minute. The last collapsed with a hiss of pressurized gas escaping its armor. Kale caught his breath, turning to her. Sira was already looking at him. They didn't say what they both felt. They didn't need to. They reached the outer threshold of the summit temple, just as the sun began to crest over the mountain's rim, casting long beams of gold across the ancient stone. The path was choked with mist and ruins half swallowed by time, but Kale didn't slow. Sira moved beside him, her synthetic limb emitting soft pulses of energy with each step, steady and sure. Then they saw them, figures waiting in the shadow of the temple gate, not coalition guards, not allies. Zoric soldiers, a full detachment, and at their center stood Commander Virek. Kale's heart sank. Sira froze mid-step. The Thalari commander's posture was unmistakable. Arms relaxed, mandibles, still weapon not drawn. He wasn't captured, he was cooperating. "You really didn't think you could reach the summit without interference, did you?" Virek said, stepping forward, voice like crushed metal. Sira straightened. Her voice was calm, cold. "You betrayed your charge." "I preserved my people," Virek replied. The Zorics offered terms. A calculated surrender in exchange for your neural implant data. With it, they can destroy the stellar cleaver themselves, ending the war without planetary extinction. By turning me over to them, she asked, so they can extract that data from my brain before killing me. Virek said nothing. Kale's hand hovered near his weapon. One of the Zarik's commanders stepped forward. The Terran is irrelevant. He will be eliminated after extraction. Syra didn't flinch. Her eyes remained locked on Virek. And you believe they'll honor that deal, that they'll spare the central Aurelian worlds? I believe in survival, Virek said. No. You believe in cowardice, she replied, but I believe in this. She stepped backward, shoulder brushing Kale's arm. They moved as one. The air between them crackled faintly, not with static, but with tension, resonance, memory. And then she threw something. A flash grenade, standard issue for high-risk diplomatic extractions. Kale turned away a split second before detonation. A blinding flare lit the mist in all directions, followed by high-pitched dissonance that ruptured the audio receptors of the Zorik's armor. Move, Sarah shouted, grabbing Kale's wrist. They sprinted toward the temple steps. Plasma fire erupted around them as the soldiers regained coordination. But coalition peacekeepers positioned within the temple began returning fire. A full skirmish exploded between ancient statues and crumbling columns. Halfway up the stairs, Kale heard Syra gasp. He turned just as an energy bolt slammed into her shoulder, spinning her sideways. She staggered, but did not fall. Without thinking, Kale scooped her into his arms. Her body felt lighter than it should, yet solid, still full of fight. Don't say anything heroic, she murmured, grimacing. Too late, he said. I already carried you once. We've got precedent. He ran the final steps under cover fire energy bolts, tearing up stone just behind his boots. With one final push, they crossed the threshold and collapsed behind a barrier as the temple gates sealed behind them. Silence fell. Coalition medics and guards swarmed, but Syra raised a hand, halting them. I need to speak to him first, she said. They gave her space. Kale helped her sit, fingers trembling slightly as he checked the prosthetic interface and the shoulder wound. It'll hold, he said. But you need region treatment. Later, she said. There is something we haven't spoken about. He nodded. The bond. Yes. Her voice lowered. It's permanent now. The pod completed a full resonance cycle. We're linked at a depth that few have survived. The fusion is adaptive responsive but irreversible. I know, Kale said softly. I felt it the moment we stepped out. She looked at him, truly looked. I've read about Terran attachment rituals. You value consent, don't you? He gave a quiet laugh. We also value saving people's lives, which you've done for me just as much. She shifted closer. Her fingers brushed his cheek. Then when this summit is over, when I give them the data and they deactivate the stellar cleaver, what happens next? Kale hesitated. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because he wasn't sure she'd want to hear it. I think we figured that out together. Syra nodded. Good. A moment passed. Then she exhaled and turned toward the summit hall. Her pace was slow but deliberate. The summit resumed within hours. Representatives of the Orion Concord Aurelian elders, and even reluctant Zarik's delegates, assembled around a vast circular dais of white stone. Holographic screens hovered above, broadcasting tension across a dozen star systems. Syra stood at the center. She extracted a tiny capsule from beneath her collar, a bioprotected data key. Embedded within was the full schematic of the stellar cleaver's targeting system, along with its weaknesses, fail-safes, and hidden redundancies. If the summit failed, this data would allow conquered forces to dismantle it if they reached it in time. If we do not agree on disarmament today, Syra said, her voice ringing clear across the chamber, this data will be used to destroy your weapon. She met the gaze of the Zorik's emissary. And if you harm me, that knowledge dies with me. Silence, then a slow, deliberate nod. The accord passed. Weapons would be dismantled, and so would the boundaries between old enemies. Hours later, Kale sat beside her in a private chamber, watching as a coalition medic closed the last wound across her shoulder. Syra moved with ease now. The prosthetic was a natural part of her gait. You're cleared for planetary travel, the medic said. Your vitals are stabilized. After the door closed, Syra turned to Kale. I've been offered a new post, she said. Ambassador to Terra Nova. Kale raised his eyebrows. Earth. It's not official unless you agree. He blinked. Me. You're part of me now. I can't pretend otherwise. If I go to your world, I go as both diplomat and something else. Kale smiled, a slow warmth spreading through his chest. Then I hope you like rain. The transport shuttle hummed beneath their feet as it broke atmosphere over Terra Nova. Through the viewport, Kale watched the continents take shape. Familiar landmasses wrapped in deep blue oceans, sunlit cloud patterns swirling like old memories. He hadn't been back to Earth in years. Not since before the war. Not since before her. Syra sat beside him, adorned in formal ambassadorial robes, stitched with threads that shimmered like liquid glass. Her synthetic leg, now fully integrated, made no sound as she shifted to look out the window. There was a calm to her now, not resignation, not detachment. Something deeper, acceptance. Below them lay Aurex Citadel, the central headquarters of the Orion Concord. The towering spires jutted from the Earth's surface like a crown of intention, half organic, half metal, pulsating with light. Syra would take her place there among representatives from every known species. A symbol of peace, a living bridge. "You nervous?" Kale asked, breaking the silence. She turned to him. "Less than I should be." He smiled. "You're about to walk into a council chamber filled with xenobiologists, AI negotiators, military tacticians, and legacy politicians, all of whom think Aurelians shouldn't be part of the Conquered." "Yes," she said, "but I'm bringing something they can't argue with." "What's that?" She reached for his hand, interlaced their fingers. Proof that harmony isn't theoretical. They exited the shuttle arm in arm, descending the curved ramp into a sea of flashing lights and murmured voices. Dozens of languages filtered through the air, some vocal, others vibrational, still more purely bioluminescent. Kael could feel Syra's presence in his mind, still soft, but steady like a lighthouse on a distant shore. The formalities blurred together: introductions, security clearances, cross-species immunological scans. Everywhere they went, eyes followed them. Some curious, some hostile, others hopeful, but nothing prepared Kael for the child. He stood by one of the entrance terminals, no more than 6 years old, with skin the shade of dusk and small silver ridges at the edges of his temples, subtle signs of Aurelian ancestry. He stared at Syra with wide green eyes, then at Kael, and then he smiled. The boy's mother rushed forward, bowing slightly. "Forgive us. He saw the broadcast from the summit. He knows who you are." Syra crouched before the child, her movement smooth and practiced. "What's your name?" "Jory," he said. "Are you Aurelian?" she asked gently. "I don't know," he admitted. "My father was Terran. He died before I was born." She nodded, then touched his forehead, 2 fingers lightly pressing between his ridges. A gesture of recognition. Kael watched silently. This wasn't just policy. This was legacy. Later in their shared quarters overlooking the bay, Kael stood barefoot on the observation deck, looking out at the sea. The waves moved with mechanical rhythm tides, guided as much by technology now as the moon. Syra approached from behind her presence, brushing against his thoughts like silk. "They've accepted me," she said softly, despite their doubts. "Because you're undeniable," he replied. She stepped beside him. "And you?" Kael looked at her, really looked. He'd saved her on a battlefield, fused his nervous system to hers, fought beside her, carried her, fled with her, chose her again and again in every moment that mattered. Now she stood before him, not as a patient or a refugee, not even as a diplomat, but as Syra Valen. A partner. "I think he said this is where I'm supposed to be." A quiet passed between them, rich, full of things left unsaid and deeply understood. Then her fingers found his again. And as the lights of Aurex Citadel glimmered beneath the stars, Kael Riven and Syra Valen stood together, ambassador and medic, Aurelian and Terran, united not by duty or accident but by choice. And somewhere deep in the back of their minds, the bond still pulsed. A reminder that love in all its forms is the most advanced technology the galaxy has ever known. And that was the story of Kael and Syra, the living bridge. From a scorched battlefield to the chambers of peace, theirs was a journey that began with injury and ended in transformation of body, of spirit, and of history. If you found yourself drawn to the emotion, the firelight, the pulse of distant stars, and most of all, the unspoken connection between 2 souls from opposite worlds, then this story was made for you. In a galaxy of conflict and chaos, connection is the rarest currency. And whether it's neural links, hybrid limbs, or a shared glance under fire, it's that connection that changes everything. If you enjoyed this long-form HFY-style tale, please leave a comment below. What was your favorite moment? Would you follow Syra and Kael into a sequel, or perhaps into a war they helped prevent? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more cinematic sci-fi stories, where humanity isn't just the underdog, it's the heart of the universe. Until next time, fellow traveler, this is the Archive of Humanity signing off.